Alrighty. So Alexander in Egypt. Um, that's what I will be presenting today. My name is Colton Cultwriter. So first off, we're going to talk about the political climate in Egypt. Egypt had been ruled by the Persians for a long time, about for a couple hundred years, up until about 80 something like that years before Alexander came to Egypt. About 80 something 80 to 60 years before Alexander came to Egypt, the Egyptians actually expelled the Persians from Egypt. And they were gone for probably about 40 to 60 years until about 10 to 20 years before Alexander conquered Egypt. At that point, the Persians came back. But for the last 20 years or so, they had been ruled by the Persians right up until Alexander came. Egypt was ready for change in leadership in the government. They didn't want to be ruled by the Persians anymore. The Persians were taking their wealth. They were, kind of oppressive. They didn't let them foster a strong military or anything like that. So it was very hard for them. The social systems, culture, and government and beliefs of Egypt were forever affected by Alexander and his conquest, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on during the presentation. But after Alexander conquered Egypt, Egypt would never really be the same again. So to start off with, Macedonian superiority. Macedon had, debatably, besides China, the strongest military in the ancient world at the time. Macedonian superiority started with Alexander's father, Philip II. Philip II had a ton of marriages. A lot of them were very political. Most of them were very political. They were to secure tight kinship between the Greek states and between Macedon, and kind of ensure a lineage for Alexander when he took up kingship of Macedon. Philip started reinvigorating the military phalanx system of Greece with longer pole arms and smaller shields for easier movement. I was listening to Mania for Subjugation by Dan Carlin on the Hardcore History podcast. And he was talking about how he may have actually gotten this idea from early versions of the Iliad. So when the Greeks conquered Troy, they reportedly used longer pole arms in their phalanx. So that idea may have come from that. It may not have. That may just be something that I heard that's not true. But I think that may be a part of it. Then, in about 336 BC, Philip II of Macedon died, at which point Alexander was about 20 years old. He took up kingship, he took up leadership of Macedon, and he wasted no time. He established a stronger hold over Greece before he moved on from Macedon and Greece to conquer the rest of the world that was known to them at the time, or most of the rest of the world that was known to them at the time. I have a quote here. King Alexander dedicated the temple to Athena Polias. This is an inscription on an Ionian temple in Greece, circa 332 BC. So right around the time Alexander started leaving Greece, he was still working in Greece while he was gone to ensure stronger stability, dedicate temples, create structures, create large buildings to, in his name, dedicate them in his name, so that way he had cemented a stronger control of Greece even while he was away, because there was always that fear that there would be an uprising in Greece and that the entire Alexandrian Empire would fall apart. So the march into Egypt. Alexander basically just walked into Egypt. The Egyptians did not really put up a fight. The Persians put up a fight, but there weren't a ton of Persians in Egypt at the time. So he kind of walked in and took it. The Egyptians were really sick of the Persians, so especially an outside neighbor that probably had a little more respect for their beliefs and their values than the Persians did, was probably a better fit. After conquering Egypt, Alexander was named a pharaoh by an oracle, and this was all after taking the title of son of Amun, which that quote, son of Amun, him taking the title of son of Amun, comes from the Journal of Egyptian Archaeology. Alexander in Egypt, and Yeah, he became a pharaoh, which for a long time after Alexander, he took control of the government, and even for later generations, the pharaohs of Egypt were part Egyptian and Greek. Think of the Ptolemies, Cleopatra. They were of Macedonian. Her entire family, their entire family was of Macedonian descent, not of just Egyptian descent. So it was a bit of a change from traditional Egyptian pharaohship being ruled by someone who's 100% Egyptian into something that's a little bit more. I mean, other than the dynasty, a couple of the dynasties that came from foreign invaders that took up dynasties in Egypt, the Ptolemies were one of the few that were not 100% Egyptian in their rulership of Egypt. Alexandria. Upon the successful capture of Egypt, Alexander laid out plans for Alexandria. The city is still in modern times named after Alexander the Great and is still called Alexandria. This is one of many Alexandrias across the ancient world. There were about 20. I mean, he renamed a ton of cities when he conquered to cement control of Greek control of the ancient world. But about 20 of these cities were named after himself, Alexandria. A fun side note is that one of these cities was named after Bucephalus, which is in modern day Pakistan, and Bucephalus was his horse. So he named a city after his horse as well, which is kind of an honor for, I mean, I assume if you're that horse, you got to feel pretty good. You know what I mean? Not many cities are named after conquerors' horses. So I'm sure that's very, very cool. Then after he conquered, he created many temples, especially in Alexandria, to both Greek and Egyptian gods. And then the quote below that is from the Anabasis of Alexander, Book 3, Chapter 1. And it's talking in regards to these matters, the matters of creating temples to the Greek and Egyptian gods, and sacrifices. The part that's cut out there is talking about sacrifices, that the Egyptians were happy. The Egyptians were happy. They were favorable to the sacrifices to Isis and other Egyptian gods, Amun, and other Egyptian gods that Alexander undertook. But he didn't just do that for Greek god or for Egyptian gods. He did that for Greek gods too. So really, after this generation, there were a lot of Egyptians that worshipped Greek gods, and there were a lot of Greeks outside of Egypt, not just in Egypt or outside of Greece, not just in Egypt, but all over the world that Alexandria had conquered, that stayed behind and kind of had families that worshipped Greek gods and foreign gods. There's at one point even Alexander worshipped the Persian gods as well. So he didn't just make sacrifice to the Egyptian gods, but after he conquered Persia, he worshipped the Persian gods for a little bit as well. The big ideas, government. Alexander became the king of Greece after his father and continued conquering the world until his untimely death. And he was mid-30s when he died, early to mid-30s. And this had a major effect on the political landscape of the whole planet at the time, down on through Western civilization, as people in the modern day tried to do what Alexander did and spread their culture and their beliefs and their values across the world and try to create some sort of hybrid culture. Whenever someone takes over an area, the first thing that they do is they try to stamp out resistance, and then they try to blend into the culture and really adopt those people into their system, which goes into the next point, which is belief in culture. Alexander had an effect on the beliefs in all of the places he conquered, trying to blend Greek gods and the culture and Greek culture with the belief systems of the conquered countries. He built temples to Greek and non-Greek gods alike. And as I said before, when he got to Persia and through Persia, he also worshipped the Persian gods, and he tried to blend Greek culture into Persian culture at the same time in that area. So that was very interesting. The social systems. Alexander affected the social systems of places like Egypt by installing a Greek ruling class and creating more opportunity for Greek-style education in the trades of the time, as well as philosophical thought. Greeks came to have a place in almost every place conquered by Alexander, even being deified in many. Alexander was even deified in many of these places as a god, like as a pharaoh in Egypt. So, and even Greece, he was said to have had be a descendant of Achilles and be related to Hercules, and all of these things that kind of contributed to the myth of Alexander and to creating this larger than life figure that the Greeks would kind of fall behind and follow. And that's my presentation.